You're listening to the G&D show with Govinda and Dan of City of Bristol College. If you've got any comments or questions for us to read out on the show, then email us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Again, that's thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Let's get on with the show. What's good, people? Welcome to the G&D show. My name's Dan.
And my name's Gigi.
And today we're going to do something different. We've had guests on in the past, people from the college, and it's been wonderful having them on. But I reached out to Gigi kind of halfway through the week, right, or earlier this week, and said,
Yeah.
we spoke casually about this last Friday or Friday before?
Last Friday. Definitely last Friday.
Last Friday, wow.
Yeah.
And what we found was that actually there was a big conversation for both of us to have this. I mean, that was really deeply personal to both of us as well. But also it's a conversation that is ever growing, ever needing to be had. And so we certainly felt like this was the platform that we were going to speak about it on. And it is basically about our manhood, about our masculinity, about us being men. And as we do, we're going to start off with the phrase of the day. And I found this one because this one probably is going to seep or pop back up into everything that Gigi and I say throughout this episode. The quote is by Blaise Pascal, who's a French mathematician. And he said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone.
Yeah.
Now, as is tradition, Gigi, why don't you take it away and run down your ideas of what that's talking about?
Sure. Do you know the funny thing about that quote is that quote come up quite a few times over the last couple of months for me. So I'm glad you picked that one up because actually, you know, I'm not completely new to it. So what I personally think, what I get from that is that traditionally speaking, you know, this is not all men, and that's what I want to make absolutely clear. I think biologically, us men have this will, this desire to do more and more and more. And actually, that quote, when I first read it, actually gave me a little bit of solace and a little bit of respite from my own role that I play. And in that, I think on a personal level, again, it's not all men, we are probably not great thinkers. We're great doers, which is fine. That's how things are. And actually, what this quote is saying to me on a personal level is that, yeah, we're really bad at being on our own. We're really bad with our own thoughts. We're really bad with being quiet, right? And also, it's a good timing because actually we're in the middle of a lockdown, right, as well. So people naturally have said we're not great at being on our own with our thoughts and just ourselves. We need something to do. And actually, what I'm beginning to see from this is going to get really deep straight away. Is actually it almost seems like this is almost a desire to or a band-aid to cover our deeper wounds and our traumas and our issues and push them aside and be more doers. And we think by virtue of doing more, we're going to feel better and do better. We might in the interim on the short period of time, but actually it takes a lot of courage to sit down with your own thoughts, as messed up as they may be, right? And work on them and work through them. That's not an overnight process, of course not. And this again, it's probably just my own biases coming across. I'm just a human being. And I'm beginning to think as a male as myself that we're not very good at doing that. That's what I get from it.
Yeah, I would glean from this quote that we don't take enough time to pause. I mean, obviously, when Blaise said man, he's talking about people, everyone. But for the sake of the context of this episode, we're going to focus on men and certainly say that, just like you said, Gigi, there's this constant need for us to feel productive. We must produce, we must create, we must build, we must, da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
And I'm not saying this is exclusive to men. And so when we are put in a position where we cannot, or where we feel like we are restricted to do so, we react, not with thought, with introspection, with reflection. We just react. And that can be seen in so many different areas of where men, unfortunately, are at the forefront of some great things, but also some really, really, really awful, god awful things.
Mm.
And that's what I always think about when I hear this quote is there's not that space for us to go, hang on, what is actually the best outcome that I could produce out of this situation?
Mm.
And we have, I don't know whether to say, we have the privileges of being a man that basically means that we are not held back by our bodies governing what happens in our life. Our bodies forcing us to consider what we need to bring out with us when we leave the house. Our bodies governing what our mood might be the next day or once a month. Our bodies not governing what we need to, cover up or consider about covering up when we leave the house and all this stuff. But with that privilege comes an apathy that we don't practice managing because maybe we're not realizing we have to. And so we don't get given that place of, or we don't get given, we don't take that place, that space of privilege to actually stop and go, let me actually think about this because I'm not being governed by this moment from anything. So let me govern it properly, as opposed to letting it be left to happenstance or left to my own instinctive nature, which I'm not taking any governance over either. That's what I get from that quote.
I like that.
You're listening to the G&D show with Gigi and Dan. If anything has touched you or been poignant with you, or in any episode you've heard something and gone, these guys seem like they know how to support a person, I'm going to reach out and ask for some support, then you can email us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. That, of course, includes group sessions that you can book with Gigi and who can join into any of your tutorials. Or you can come and join me in my team's group sessions, where I do group sessions from the other subject every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 4 p.m. Or, of course, you can just have one-to-ones with myself or Gigi. Just let us know in that email address, which is, again, thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Let's get back to the show.
Right, guys, just as we are exploring the roles of men or masculinity in our current times, me and Dan are going to go about telling you our personal stories because I feel that's appropriate and right to do in terms of where we've come from and gives us a little bit of a narrative as to why we're talking about this and why we're so passionate about this subject in general. So me and Dan have had these conversations throughout the last 3 or 4 months. We haven't actually known each other for that long, and the crux or the core of our conversations are around masculinity and the identities we build around that. So on a personal level, I think it's definitely fair to say that I've been on a journey myself of exploring what the healthy forms of masculinity is and how they manifest in the world for me and perhaps other people. And I think for me, growing up in an all boys school as well, the amplification or the sheer nature of being more manly, quote unquote, was always a pressure that was put on my shoulders, always amongst my peers, amongst my teachers as well, not all. And little did I know back then is that actually what was going on with me is I was very rebellious at that age and was up until my mid-20s, in the sense that there was something irking me, in the deep depths of my soul, or maybe in the recess of the darker parts of my brain, that was telling me that I'm not comfortable with this situation. I'm not comfortable perhaps with myself at that moment as well. And actually, I was having thoughts at that time already about what is it to be a man? What does it mean? And the more and more I unpacked and unraveled and start to enjoy stuff that's not traditionally associated with being a man, again, these are perhaps negative stereotypes that come up, for example, about not showing emotion. I've always been a poet. I've always liked writing. And in fact, that came with a lot of resistance from my peers and my friends about it not being manly enough, or like men don't write or express themselves in that way. And actually, without sounding like a blithering idiot, most of the good poets that I read and enjoyed were actually men. So that gave me good hope, fantastic hope, that actually a man can do this. A man can step into that. It's not necessarily something that needs to be dictated to them by society or whatever experiences we have. And so naturally, I kind of got more and more away from my sporty personality, which I suppose I did as a way of fitting in, which was fine. It served its purpose. I loved playing football and rugby as well, which was fine. And I loved basketball, and that was great. And I think that's when I start to really understand, reflecting back, that actually a man can be more balanced. It is not necessarily that we have to be more masculine to solve our problems. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with showing our feminine side. And actually, when I was getting more and more into my philosophical studies, I started to appreciate more that the Eastern arts and the Eastern philosophies appreciate nuances a lot more. You know, they totally celebrate and understand the fact that no man is 100% fully masculine. Yeah, I don't mean biologically, I mean characteristically, right? And actually, there was a funny event that happened when I first got into teaching when I was about 26 that really got me to see this in a different way. I was sat there casually observing. I was making myself a hot drink, and there was really not much to do at that point. And so my senses were heightened, and my capacity to listen were there, and they were much more intense, I'd say. And I overheard a conversation from a student to another teacher saying, "Why, as a woman, am I not allowed to do this? You know, why is it as a female I'm not allowed to express myself like this? You know, why is it as a young girl I'm not allowed to express that I want to go in a career or a trade that is predominantly, you know, male?" And that got me thinking. I was like, healthy questions are fantastic. And actually, it goes to show you how much of ourselves are so restricted under all that heavy baggage of you must be this way. And don't get me wrong, ladies and gents, it serves a purpose to in the very beginning, in the sense that we need to orient ourselves amongst the world. We need to find out where we're going to go. But I think there comes a time and a place at some age, maybe a lot earlier than you think, where you start to veer off that track a little bit and start to actually see it for what it's worth. Then you start to see what your tastes are, what your values are, and then you start to realize actually they might be very, very independent and away from, well, I say independent, they're probably not, because actually one gives rise to the other. But you start to see the relationship between what you thought you were and where you can redefine and reshape what you want to be, and express that in a way that's healthy and be okay and comfortable with it. I know that's not easy because obviously there's stigmas involved. So, as I said before, start to go more and more into it. Up until now, I've cut out a lot of bits and stuff because this is probably where the most interesting parts are. I really questioned, um, again, like, for me, I just sat in a quiet room and I said to myself, okay, I'm in a position right now where I don't think I communicate very well. I'm in a position right now where I cannot, again, I'm going to use this word as it's quite a cliche. I'm not able to authentically express myself as a male, never mind a human being, you know? And I'm very deeply concerned and uncomfortable with the paradigms that are pushed upon me. You know, Dan knows this. In my private practice, I am a relationship coach. That's my core thing. I'm interested in that. And actually, it was an overlap between that. I start to redefine and relook at how we as men turn up in communication and in relationships. And actually, we're not that bloody good at it. You know, there's few that are fantastic at it, by the way. They are naturally born with that talent. They are men like that. And I start to realize more and more. And I was like, well, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And I start to understand actually that for me, the antidote to all of this is setting into becoming more comfortable with what I personally think a man is for myself, not everyone else. I'm not interested in superimposing my will or my ideas or my definitions of what a man wants to be. In fact, I find that super cringe. And then this is the point where my poetry started to flourish a little bit more, and some of the stuff that I had hidden for a little while, you know, like my love for flamenco and stuff, and the arts around it, and the culture and lifestyle around that, I started to become more vocal about it, and I was okay. I was accepting of myself because I had to accept myself. In other words, for other people to accept me as well. And then that's the point where I start to say, you know what? I'm actually okay, and I'm comfortable with this now. I'm okay with saying, okay, these paradigms that were given to me, they're fine. They work for people. That's great. But at what point am I overcompensating for certain areas and being over masculine or hyper masculine? right? And I start to look at the manifestations of that in my own life and in modern day. And I was like, that's where I took a stand and start to rewrite the book for myself. And I want to make this abundantly clear. This is not a paradigm or blueprint for you to become a different person or a different man. This is a journey that I think it's your prerogative to unpack and kind of unlearn, quote unquote, certain things. And so that's been my journey so far. And lo and behold, I look back and see the my own um, role models and heroes that I look up to that are men. And there were people who are actually, I have no shame in saying, were quite effeminate actually, you know, and that I really really liked, and they all had a love for art and creativity. So that for me was just an amazing journey. But of course, it was very painful, and it did take me a lot of time. That's basically in a nutshell my story about masculinity and you know what it feels like to be a man these days. I think it is. There's a quote somewhere. I don't know who said it, but I'm going to butcher it. Is it's about when you get to a certain age, life is not about learning more. It's about unlearning some of the stuff, right? And that for me is beautiful because that doesn't mean you stop learning. That means you start to create a lot more room for things that are a little bit more nourishing to you and that are just more aligned with where you are at that moment in terms of your values and so on. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to the wonderful Dan, and I'm very interested to hear his story because I know bits of it, but I don't know all of it.
Thanks, man. The part about unlearning is a big yes. Um, for anyone listening, actually, and I think right now in the context of us talking about men and masculinity, guys, there are probably things you think of straight away where you're like, I need to unlearn this. This is something I don't like about myself. That's something you need to unlearn. But everyone, that's what unlearning is all about, is stopping behaviors and replacing them with new, healthier ones, for sure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's some similarities in understanding my place as a human being, as an individual. But I've always been. I think it's fair to say now that I am who I am, and I kind of understand myself more now as a person I am. Just so everyone actually to get some perspective on it, everyone. I'm in my mid-30s, and it's at this stage where I feel more grounded in an understanding, and this understanding only came through about a month ago of how I am. And this is how I've always been. But the difference is, and this is the pattern, is how I've been accepted and in what circumstances and contexts physically I've been in where I've been accepted and in what behavior type I've put forward that's given me, I guess, some solidarity in recognizing my own sense of being a man. So I think it's fair to say that when I look at my expression, for the most part, I'm mostly masculine, right? I'm more man than woman, that's for sure. And that's in terms of how I express. But there are some days where I feel a little bit more on the softer, gentler side, and I might do my hair a certain way, might dress with certain colors, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't go past a certain point because I just don't feel like that's a part of me that is ever going to be expressed, or I don't think that's a part of me, to put it that way. But I think that more feminine side of me has always been there, but it really found it really, really difficult growing up, particularly in the 90s, where I don't know if this happens still, and it'd be a shame if it did, where, you know, calling kids gay in the playground and stuff like that for being a bit girly when they were guys is not only homophobic, but it's sexist as hell as well. Because obviously it pits this idea that if you're a girl or if you're a woman, you're soft, and that's not okay. Guys aren't allowed to be soft. And that message is definitely hit home at any age. You feel that whether you like it or not, because effectively what you're doing is you're behaving in a way that you might not be aware is more girly. But when you're vilified for that behavior, you're being told that being sensitive or being soft is bad. And so when you might see that present itself in the women around you, that will then set off a tone of misogyny, which inadvertently happened with me. So I came to hate myself. I came to hate men for the way they treated me because I was so-called sensitive and soft. But I also came to not hate women, but have a negative bias towards women as well, because I had it drummed into me that sensitivity, emotions, sentiment, caring were all traits that were bad for me to express. But I couldn't set the difference between me and women, so I just said it as those traits are bad, even though they were innately part of who I was and how I expressed myself. I had a lot of challenges during my teens, and there's some of them too personal to share here. But in terms of being a man, I never identified with it. And when I say that at the time, it was because when I looked at men, yes, I played rugby for 7 years. I was a second row, a lock, because from about the age of 13, I was 6'4" and relatively well built. I was quite athletic. I'm still 6'4", wouldn't say athletic anymore, but nonetheless at the time. Also, for those of you who hadn't guessed, if you haven't seen my avatar or our avatars, I'm brown. I'm mixed race. And again, in the 90s, early 2000s, that also set a tone of what was expected of my masculinity. One thing that was really heavy on my shoulders was that when you're a man, masculinity is expected. When you're a man of color, and certainly an Afro-Caribbean, African man, your masculinity, the expectations of your masculinity might double, in some cases triple. The expectations that you show up as a tough man is heavy. So when a brown man rolls up in people's life and he's like, I like Moulin Rouge, I perform in musicals, I'm in theatre, I wore a tutu once, I like to sing, I cry every now and then, people didn't know what to do with it. The only thing they knew to do with it was to literally take the mick out of it, run it into the mud, shame it, because it's not what they were used to. And actually, I've got to catch myself now, because I'm aware I'm talking about myself like it's it's not me. But I'll actually openly say right now, the reason I'm doing that is because when I try to mentalize the fact that that was me, I realize that I need to have some conversations with some practitioners about that in more detail, because I'm not ready to make that such a close story to me, because that's how much it hurt. I was rejected for who I really was inside. And the damage that does and did to me it hasn't been fully explored yet. But that was what masculinity was to me growing up, was this idea of not being emotional. It was the traditions, it was the stereotypes, liking sports. I remember someone actually asking me, what are you worth? Because I said I didn't like football, and I still don't. But they said, what are you worth? My worth was brought into question because I didn't like a sport. And it's wild the way that it was perpetuated ongoing until eventually I kind of lived into it. And I just thought, right, well, do you know what then? I'm not a man. And for a long time, I'll even say, I got upset if anyone referred to me as a man. I got mad. How dare you call me a man? Because in my eyes, a man is a horrible thing. It bullies, it jabs, it causes wars, it rapes, it kills, it pillages. This is all I got of man, right? And so I hated the idea of being called that. But that was me. I was a man. I couldn't deny it. And I had a real weird dysphoria with myself for a long time, because I had to accept eventually, of course, that I am a man. Standard. That's who I am. But what really hit home, and this is what hit me, this is what really landed it, is when I had a partner, and I have to talk about this in a more abstract way. When I had a partner, a girlfriend, who went through a rigmarole of experiences that I would say define many parts of womanhood, as opposed to, they certainly cannot be anything a man ever experiences, right? I wouldn't say they define a woman, they make a woman. I'm not about that life, I think. And I just want to make this clear. I don't think womanhood is defined by things that like childbirth and stuff like that. But I do think they can be defining factors because men can't experience those things. When I watched her go through these experiences, I was like, you can't be anything else in conjunction with this. And it forced me to look into myself and go, ask that question again. What does it mean to be a man, dude? What is this about? And I started to naturally play into some of the gender roles that I actually hated before about being a man. because it was necessary. It was unnecessary. It was it was absolutely required of me to step into some of those roles that I didn't like before, because I was like, that would make me a man. I don't like it. Like, I don't want to do that. But then it came to a head when I started to think, just like you did, Gigi, about the characters in my life that I grew up with, that I looked at as men and actually didn't see them as men. That was the thing. I didn't see them as men. I saw them as people, individual persons, but just representing themselves. And I think of people like Prince. I think of people like Dennis Rodman. You know, I think of RuPaul. I even think in some part in the way that Outkast presented themselves, you know? And I never saw that. I never saw them as men. Because again, in my head, men was wired to be this like Jason Statham type. Right? But not even that, because even Jason Statham is cool.
Yeah.
Like, they were really getting an idea of how I really felt about him, right? And I thought to myself, it's funny how I've seen some really magnificent I can't deny that's masculinity. I can't. Because it's presenting in a very, very masculine manner, but it's playing around with it. It's making a mockery of it. And of course, I've jumped over a huge part. I'm looking at the timer and I can't get it all out. So I've jumped over a huge part where actually I recognize gender expression is as much a toy as we want it to be. The idea that we can show up as a man one day and a woman the next is completely our freedom. The only thing, like you pointed to, that holds us back from that is basically society's norms. So social norms that actually are quite harmful, gender norms that are harmful. We can do that. Nothing is stopping us from doing that. The only thing that might be odd is that people go, well, you've been dressing this way for so long, suddenly you're dressing like this. What happened, you know? But no, it was when I kind of thought, you know what, this whole thing is so malleable. No one's asked you to turn up as a man every single day. Nothing's asked you to turn up as a man every single day.
Correct.
These different people showing up in your life and going, you know, hey, be a man, be a man, be a man, be a man, be a man. All they're doing is they're just not comfortable with how you're showing up as a new person in their life. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. And so when I started to sit in that, the thing that helped me define masculinity was this. And this is where I landed, and this is where I will land. Masculinity to me is defined, and this is where it's applied to gender. We'll go into the other parts of this in the next bit. Masculinity defined to me, when we have to apply it to gender, because again, we'll say it's not always applied to gender, we need to get that real, is being aware of everything that does not hold you back and using the challenges as an opportunity to support, to learn yourself in those challenges, learn your emotions, learn your psychology, learn you, to the point where you can then step in and support those in their positions where they are hindered by what you are not hindered by. Men are so privileged in what we are not held back by. It is mad. And I'm talking again in conjunction of what I've experienced my partner have to go through in the last 12 months alone. We are so privileged in what we do not have to experience as men, that actually our role is that support, is that center, but not center of all, not center of attention, not center of being, but that place of center where we can go, I understand, through understanding my own emotions, my own feelings, my own experiences, I can understand others by some proxy. I can learn how to empathize more. I can learn how to support better. I can learn, and if I don't, I can ask. I can learn how to ask, because I've had to ask for help too. I've gone through experiences that I didn't know how to deal with on my own, so I had to ask too. So I'm going to make sure that I ask them, and that they can ask me. I want to make sure I'm a safe space where we can explore, we can learn, we can grow together. Masculinity is a place, not again a center of attention, not a center of being, not a center of the universe, but a place of collaborative, community, collective understanding and connection. And that's what I'm going to allow masculinity to be moving forward, based on everything that I've seen and everything that I've experienced. I felt more time running men into the ground there, but There you are. But we'll explore
it is
more in
what
the
it
next
is.
section. Exactly. You're listening to the G&D show with Gigi and Dan. If anything has touched you or been poignant with you, or in any episode you've heard something and gone, these guys seem like they know how to support a person, I'm going to reach out and ask for some support, then you can email us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. That, of course, includes group sessions that you can book with Gigi and who can join into any of your tutorials, or you can come and join me in my team's group sessions where I do group sessions from the other subject every Monday, Wednesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Or of course, you can just have one-to-ones with myself or Gigi. Just let us know in that email address, which is again, thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Let's get back to the show.
Me and Dan, for the next segment of this podcast, we've got some articles that we discussed and we're going to talk about for the remainder. And these are very much directly linked to what we're talking about in some ways as well, but also goes in more detail. So I've got two articles. Dan clearly knows I like one more than the other. So I'm going to start off with that one.
Yeah.
And so this basically is a snippet from a very large article, and I'm going to condense it down and just very much talk through it and read you a couple of paragraphs from it in terms of how impactful it is and how dangerous sometimes our quote unquote roles as kids are. Kids as males are, as men are. The reason why I said kids is because there is kids mentioned in this, and it goes to show you how far back all of this can go back. So this article is called "The Hidden Cost of Being a Man," and it's written by a chap called Mark Manson. Most of you guys will know his book or books. I cannot mention his books because they have a swear word in it.
Oh no, The Subtle Art of Giving an F.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Exactly.
I thought I recognized that name. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that book.
Fantastic. And he has a very healthy way of looking at masculinity, but not from your usual self-help kind of do more, be more. Kind of sounded like Hulk Hogan. But anyway, sorry, I shouldn't even mention it. But anyway, the hidden costs of being a man. So I'm going to read this to you guys out, and I'm sure you'll find it beneficial. So when I was a kid, if I fell down on the playground and started crying, my cries would usually be met with some sort of form of "get up, be a big boy." If I got beat up by my brother, my father admonished me to hit him back. In fact, encouraged me to. The other kids at school would make fun of boys who were weak or were bad at sports. As a teenager, I was bullied at times in the locker room for being nerdy. This stuff is normal. So normal that it feels stupid to even write stuff like this, because my guess is every single male reader can relate to one of the above experiences. It's often written off as boys being boys, and it has a long cultural history. Again, for most of civilization, young men were the ones responsible for protecting society. By the time they were adults, they needed to be battle hardened and, physically strong. The survival of the community often depended on it. As a result, brutal physical violence among men through organized sport was celebrated and still is today, although this is beginning to change. And men weren't able to make the cut, were ashamed for their physical weakness and for their emotional displays and vulnerable demands for affection. Men were meant to be ruthlessly competitive and emotionally self-contained, and this was the hidden cost of their physical and latter political dominance in human society. As men, we are taught from a young age to hide from our emotions rather than to engage in them. I'm going to leave it at that because it's a very lengthy one. And the other article is very much similar to that, but it expresses more of our own evident biases and why and how our experiences shape the way we end up becoming men. Yeah. So for example, me and you mentioned some of our heroes like Dennis Rodman and Prince. I was going to put Lenny Kravitz in that as well.
Oh yeah. Good shout. Absolutely. Lenny Kravitz.
Big fan of Lenny Kravitz. So I was thinking, well, what does it take for guys like that to be still male, right? Because last time you checked, Dennis Rodman, Lenny Kravitz, Prince, they're all male, right? Right? No brainer. But there's something that goes way beyond that, above our biological identities and needs, right? Because then in my way, it's a bit of a lazy thing. It's a lazy subject to fall back on by default. So this article goes into, how our experiences, how the bias is pumped into us from a very young age, and the movies we watch, for example, right? It's safe to say that most of us men gravitate more towards action movies. Why is that? I personally
Mm.
don't like action movies, right? So
Mm.
again, there's a whole topic on that around why gender roles are so strictly enforced by marketing and selling products.
So
You know,
no,
of
actually, can I interject as to why they were
course,
even there in the
please.
first place?
Yeah, of course,
And some people
absolutely.
might already know
Do
this,
so.
and it goes way beyond kind of the world wars and stuff. But it's connected to, of course, a rather misogynistic idea that men were the ones who could do all the labor, right? And they were the ones who would do all the labor and things like that. But also, things needed to be done at home. You know, food needed to be prepared and clothes needed to be washed and da 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 da. Kids need to be raised. And so it fell into this area where, and I could go into this a little bit more, but it fell into this area where, of course, because supposedly men were the ones who did the work, women were the ones who stayed at home, and that was just how it went. Now, what was also fascinating about this was that that was also imposed by our, what was it? I don't know. We talked about our sleeping habits. The idea that we're not actually supposed to be sleeping 8 hours a night. That's not what
Mm,
we're supposed to be sleeping
mm,
at all.
mm.
And that we're actually supposed to be sleeping like babies, you know, every so often. We're actually supposed to be napping throughout the day. The siesta is a better
Yeah,
sleeping pattern for us than 8 hours of sleep a night. But eight
absolutely.
hours of sleep and then a 9 to 5 job is more productive and actually has us working more than if we had intermittent sleeping breaks. So
Correct.
we're forced out of our natural being so that we can produce, because
Mm,
that's what we are effectively.
mm,
We're just producers, and yeah, and that now feeds into, well, the assumption again, because I believe I don't know if this is fair to jump onto or say. I'd like to see the timeline. There was a time when it was supposed by scientists, and it was very quickly debunked, funny enough, by a woman scientist. These male scientists basically concluded that because men's brains were bigger, we were smarter. And that did the rounds until a woman scientist did the study again and was like, "You're completely wrong. Stop that immediately." So all of this ties together to this idea that men were the ones who went out to work, and they were the ones who basically earned the money for the household back when one person earning the income for the household could do, and it didn't need two people having more than one job to live.
mm.
And then yes, one person would stay at home, and that was where that all kind of came about. But war obviously capitalized on that massively, because while women were also, you know, part of the war and stuff, it was predominantly men who would go out and be in the war while the women stayed at home,
Mm.
and so on. Sexism really did a number on our society. Because I'm going to go more into that actually about war when it comes around to me. But sorry, Govinda.
That's okay. That's fine.
Back there.
So no, it's a lovely interjection. It's fantastic. So yes, and so as I said before, these articles themselves actually, there's a lot of them around, which is fantastic. It goes to show me that a lot of men aren't taking it anymore, that they are being more vocal about it, not in a negative
Mm,
way. We're not going about saying, oh, we all hate men and stuff. No way, because actually would have taken a step back by doing that. And
mm,
actually it's more about being more thought provoking and challenging your assumptions. You know, that's the cool thing about these articles about, you know, why do you think you're like that as a man? Should you be like that? Do you have to be like that? Do you
mm,
want to be like that? Hey, what men do out there is none of my business. You know, I don't, like I said, it's not for me to rescue them or save them. But
mm,
sooner or later, I've seen a tremendous amount of men, personal friends of mine who have come out of prison and been rehabilitated, who are completely changed. And I
mm,
don't mean changed because they've had to change and reintegrate in society, but that was a catalyst almost for them to think, actually, I'm coming across in a negative way as a man. You know, this is actually toxic and is being very harmful to my partner
yeah.
and my children and my family, and then later on society as well. You
Mm.
know, so these articles are fantastic.
Oh, amazing.
How about yourself, Dan?
Yeah. I brought an article from it's not really an article, it's not one person wrote it. It asked a group of readers from a popular UK news outlet.
Mm,
What does it mean to be a man? And the responses come from the US, the UK, Mexico, and that's it. But they're very interesting and fascinating, because they all say very different things around what they feel it means to be a man, which again speaks to what you said about it being your own personal idea, right? But so I mentioned war, and I think there's something really important that we actually as men collectively, but also as a nation, really need to be aware of. Some of our parents and some of our grandparents literally went through a world war. A war. This country again has for the most part we still experience some nasty events in modern times, but I don't feel we've experienced what was experienced in World War II. The amount of stuff that they would have seen, it doesn't surprise. I'll put it this way: it does not surprise me in the slightest that people come back with PTSD, for like severe, strong PTSD. You are experiencing things to the point where your own humanity is required to leave you because you cannot view it with humanity in your mind. And I don't like the fact, even as a video gamer myself, I don't like the fact that there are video games that glorify war to the point that they do. I really would love to talk about it, but there's no point in talking about it right now. But it glorifies war, which is frightening, because war also glorifies the unhealthy, toxic types of masculinity that creates a lot of problems. There's a 6-minute video of a guy talking about some of the things he saw when he was out at war. And it's, if hell was a place on earth, quite literally, if hell was a place on earth, it would be where these people are and what they're seeing and what they're doing. It's horrific. It's terrifying that this, and I think you'd need to have some form of humanity and some form of empathy to even bring yourself close enough to see it. But this is what people are going through, right? And what frightens me about this is that there are people walking the earth who are experiencing these things and we are not, as people, giving them the respect of the harm of their mental health, truly. Because what is tied between the experiences of war, characteristics of war, and masculinity is that they almost play together in this really sordid, morbid game of dancing around the maypole. They intertwine so seamlessly. And so what I see is that masculinity almost has become this place, and this is what's spoken about in some of these stories that these guys tell. There's the fact the first one comes from a veteran. I think he's 80 years of age. There you go. Was born and lived in the UK for 40 years. And even he talks about it. The fact that men are broken fundamentally because of what our parents, our fathers, our grandfathers have experienced. The way that we're behaving now is almost like hand-me-down trauma. That stiff upper lip thing, that shut up and deal with it, that man up stuff, that's not necessary for working in Debenhams, mate. That's not necessary for pushing a forklift, my guy. That's not necessary for typing numbers in, my buddy. That's not it. That's for war. That's for when you don't need humanity, so you can shoot someone dead, so you can pardon your bunny for committing a war crime, like that. Because that's what's going on out there. And it frightens me. And it frightens me because we're slowly moving. I mean, I'm just slowly moving. We have taken on what's necessary for war into our everyday streets.
No doubt about it.
And I honestly, when I see, and I think the part that I've got to bring to my reality, because actually I lived a relatively, right, in comparison to people in the UK, I've lived a really privileged life, okay? So what I've also got to be aware of is there are parts of this nation where people do have to think like that because it feels like a war ground.
Absolutely.
Where you've got postcode gangs, where you've got extreme poverty. And I don't point to men and be like, fix up, look, do better, da-da-da-da. I could ask that of guys in those situations. But also I could say, actually, you have to live like that because that is your environment. Like you said, do I have to be like this? Some of them do, because if they don't, they die. Yeah, and that's depressing. That's depressing to think about, because then I'm thinking you're born into an environment where a type of being a man is already to your detriment, is already to your death, to your demise. Either you do the hard work that gets you out of that situation, whatever that may be, right? Whatever you see the opportunities are, whatever you see talk to someone outside of that situation, find a friend group outside of that situation, go places that are not in that situation, be where that stuff is not, and continue to be there until you live there. I don't know. I'm talking from a privileged place. I don't know. These are things that come into my head, but people who are in it, I'm like, I don't know what opportunities you have, but that's where I point to and then look at governing bodies. You know, and I go into a different conversation about it. But what these stories tell me are that there are men who are born with the sentiment that I have, the sensitivity that I have, the affinity for dancing between presenting masculine and feminine that I have. There are men who are born with characteristics and you know, desires of expression that literally their environment will not allow. Because not just in their immediate environment, but outside in the places they go to, and even when they go on holiday and stuff, they're being told this is what a man is. This is what a man is. And you know what the BS was also when I see what people say about what a real man does. A real man opens the door for his lady. A real man chops wood. A real man doesn't care about what he looks like. A real man doesn't moisturize. You know, real man doesn't do personal hygiene. A real man gets fat and sits on the couch and watches football and drinks beer. But then a real man also works out. Real man hydrates. A real man wrestles bears. A real man hunts. A real man kills. You know what I mean? And you're like, yo, can we just calm down for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, let's just stop for a second, please. Stop it. And I know. Go on, please.
Definitely. I love that you put that in, because that's been on my mind for the last couple of days. And you know, I have such a cringe radar. Yeah, I see these quotes all the time drilled in, and you know, instantly, you know how understanding I am, right? I've you know, like I don't come from the best background anyway, so part of it's, you know, it was involved with survival, so I totally get why people do that. But I also sense and see, read in between the lines, what the overcompensation is about too. Because I tell you something, when a man no longer feels like they can express themselves like quote unquote a real man, right? Whatever the Brussels sprouts that is, right? it starts to manifest in really hyper masculine and overcompensatory ways, especially on social media.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm going to suppress my feelings, but yet I'm going to put this thing out, which is a little bit passive aggressive, because I want you to get my attention, because, you know, I'm not getting myself right now. So I'm going to become more and more masculine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That I see a lot.
And do you know what's challenging is one of the big challenges is particularly for straight men, right? Cis straight men is, of course, a lot of what we have done is done things to, you know, attract a partner, right? And I've had this in my experience, is where the women in my life in the past have expected me to be this man as well. So I do want to point to this, is that this expectation is not obviously just men putting on themselves or men putting on each other. This is a kind of a more globalized expectation of men.
No doubt about it.
Right? Everyone is taught this is how men should be, and if they don't, they're not doing it right. They are fundamentally broken. Everyone is taught this, which means everyone can perpetuate this pressure upon a man's shoulders. And that's disappointing as hell. It's disappointing as hell. It's funny because I'd say, I was about to say, I'd love to see marketing pick this up and do something with it. But then I think about the Gillette advert that came out so many years ago. And honestly, the way that men responded, do you know about this? Did you hear about this?
Yeah.
Like, men were just like, it's a war on there's a war on masculinity. I'm like, the fact that you're calling it a war, chill your peas, man.
Yeah.
Chill, relax.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, a war. There's an advert came out and you're jumping straight to this place of violence, of like, again, like conflict. Like, it's such a hard wiring that I'm like, what is going to allow you to let go of that rigid pressure that's holding you in place, where you feel if you step one moment out of line, like you're so afraid of even watching, like, or being in the presence of let's say a gay guy, because heaven forbid your masculinity be that archetype of masculinity stripped away. I mean, but that's actually that says a lot in itself.
It does, doesn't
That
it?
says a lot in itself, that someone lives in such a way where they have been put into these very, very hard boundaries.
Yeah.
Where if they feel they step out of those boundaries of being a man, even a single iota, and I don't blame them, because that's conditioning.
Yep, that's
They've been
conditioning
conditioned.
one-on-one.
They've been conditioned to be like, if I take one step outside of being a man, then that's it. It's done. I'm not me anymore. The world will judge me.
Yep.
The world will fall down, and that's everyone's fault. That's everyone's fault. Like we're all in play to that.
100%.
Like it's sad. It's sad because it means there's a whole human being inside there dying to come out.
Yep.
Dying to come out. And I say this because you and I can both say, you got to interrupt me at some point, my guy. 'Cause I'll go.
No.
I'll go.
You know what? I love this, man.
I know that there will be guys, and you can spot the guys that are comfortable, and this is always going to be the case. The guys that are comfortable in being who they are, whether it is the archetype or not, will not project that onto anyone else. They will not expect other guys to be like that. And
Absolutely.
we know this, right? This is it. If you're comfortable, truly comfortable with how you are, you will not expect other people to behave the way you do.
Yep, 100%.
Right? You don't. So usually what there will be is a certain characteristic that you'll spot where you go, this guy's just comfortable. This guy's just comfortable. He's cool with it. And you can tell that almost immediately. Sometimes take a bit longer. You're like, okay, you're fine. You're not going to project this onto me. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when you have this idea of even like this internalized bias of this person in front of me, because they're speaking softer, because they have certain gesticulations, right? Or gestures.
Gestures, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they do certain things with their hands. I remember there was even a thing that these group of people brought up about like men putting their hand on their cheek when they're shocked, and it being feminine. And it's just like, yo, really? Wow, men really can't do anything. There's even a meme going around at the moment. You know, it's like, guys, is it what is it? Men, are you gay if, right? And it's a meme, so it's not being homophobic in itself. It's literally taking the mick out of this idea that men can't wear glasses, men shouldn't have cereal for breakfast. Like
men can't exfoliate.
Men can't exfoliate.
The biggest lie ever, man.
There was actually a report that suggested that it was from Australia that men who recycle are more likely to perceive to be gay. Like, also being good to the planet, like is supposedly now something that cis straight men can't do. And again, I need to keep pointing to the fact that the homophobia that's coming out here is again itself a parody of what masculinity is. Because it's the idea that masculinity needs to be so protected, so siloed, so isolated in and of itself, that even a masculine gay person cannot be accepted into this area of exclusion.
Absolutely.
Like, it's so lame. And I say that's so lame because it means that there's no room for expression. There's no room for the fluidity of a true human being to be. And again, if you fit into that silo, great. But you'll know that, and you'll feel comfortable there, and you won't feel the need to put it on someone else. But the homophobia is parody because it's just like, yo, oh my God, like, wow, the misogyny and the homophobia is real there. So masculinity, and then that's it. Masculinity in and of itself is problematic. It's bigoted, right? And it's racist. It's just masculinity becomes an archetype of the bigotries. My goodness me. So we got to break out of it. We got to stop it.
We have to, man.
It's got to stop.
And you're right, because I'm just going to add to that, because like looking at that and reflecting at the same time, you know, there was such a relief for me when I stepped away from those paradigms, you know, or the unhealthy models of it, because actually it dictated to me the way I should talk to a woman, right? And I don't agree with that. Secondly, how I should date a woman, you know, what do you think? Most dating advice is saturated by the male market, right? And they're still on the same stuff, the same low-key psychological manipulations, right? And I don't like that. So when I was able to walk away from that and then obviously publish my poetry, there was a huge relief of me. I was like, wow, I feel more comfortable with myself now. This is me. This is me now, right? I'm not trying to be something or for someone else's validation, you know, whether that's masculine validation or even feminine validation. But this is just me now, and I'm cool with it. right? So no one can accuse me of being fake or putting on something, because that's exactly how I am. So I'm coming
Yeah.
more and more true. I do believe that every single human being on this planet does have a unique, innate nature to themselves. I agree with
Yeah.
that. That's a no-brainer for me. And that was a very much a coming home kind of moment where actually, just by that process, I was able to identify a lot of stuff and step away from a lot of behavior patterns that weren't healthy for me anyway. So this is the upside of all of this, ladies and gents. If you are listening to this, of course, also bear in mind this is not something that's going to happen overnight. And also, if a large part of your energy and your identity is consumed into becoming quote unquote masculine, then yes, I do recommend that you reach out and you get support from someone, because it can be sometimes that people let go of these identities and they freak out, because they've got nothing to fill it up with. Yes, me and Dan can comfortably say to you that that can be replaced by a more healthier, authentic, genuine identity. But then again, that's not always easy for people to do. So definitely do reach out. If this is a conversation you want in coaching with us as well, reach out to us. Yeah, that's what I would say in all of this.
You're listening to the G&D show with Gigi and Dan. If anything has touched you or been poignant with you, or in any episode you've heard something and gone, these guys seem like they know how to support a person, I'm going to reach out and ask for some support, then you can email us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. That, of course, includes group sessions that you can book with Gigi and who can join into any of your tutorials, or you can come and join me in my team's group sessions where I do group sessions from the other subject every Monday, Wednesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Or of course, you can just have one-to-ones with myself or Gigi. Just let us know in that email address, which is again, thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Let's get back to the show. Gigi and I have absolutely gone over, but I think it was inevitable, to be honest. And I feel like there might even be, who knows, there might be a part two, because there's so much more to explore with this. It's something that obviously means a lot to myself and Gigi, but I'm going to let Gigi, you're going to think about something you want to leave everyone with, a statement, a thought, something. And I'll give you a moment to think about that, because there's so much to process. And there's so much that we've obviously spoken about here, that it might feel a bit overwhelming. So I'm gonna leave it with this thought, this takeaway. That listener, you're listening to this, for example, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, damn, like, this is either pretty heavy or that's pretty negative, What I would say is that this is two grown men talking about their experiences, talking about their understanding, their view of how things have been from the perspective of men, right? This is maybe a call in from men in our past. This has been a call out of men in our past, men we've seen, and so on and so forth. But what I also want to say is that from the way that I've certainly called myself out from how I behaved and conducted myself, there is always the opportunity to do more and be more every single day. Every single day. You do not have to be what people say you need to be. And I know it's a cliche, but it still needs to be said. Because let me tell you, as someone who is the way I am now, and someone who I've always been, but haven't always accepted, when you start to find the groove of being able to truly live into how you truly feel and expressing yourself how you truly want to express, and finding that place physically in the real world where you can really be yourself, and you find the people that appreciate you and respect you for who you are and accept you for who you are, and you grow into that and you change and you evolve, and you start to see that actually after all of this, being a man is only a fraction of everything that you really are, but still maybe an important part of who you are. And the expression, of course, I still want to say right now, if you're looking at if you're a non-binary person listening to this and you felt like none of this is applied to you, fair enough. I think the dance that I've had with being a man and expressing more feminine and stuff like that, I know that there's an interesting dialogue that I've had with non-binary people that's felt very familiar. I I would say perhaps there's some things in there that still might have connected to you, even if you don't identify as a man. That's absolutely fine. Maybe there's something in there that's identified to you, but nonetheless, you're in charge. Take charge. Take ownership. Do good by yourself, and actually learn what doing good by yourself feels like first, because then you also learn how to do good by others, and that's what I want to be able to leave you with right now, because I think that's what men need to do more of. We have done, and I know that I've talked smack about men in this episode, but actually it all stems back to the fact that we haven't treated ourselves well enough.
Exactly.
And we don't know how to. So wherever you are, wherever you're at, learn how to do that. Find out what the first step is and how to treat yourself better so that you can learn how to treat others better. But start with yourself first and see what that really looks like. Because trust me, it could start with moisturizing.
Exactly.
For real. Seriously. That could be the start. But that's it.
Join us in the next podcast where we talk about our 5 favorite moisturizers.
Yeah, but I do actually have a top 2 though, for real. So we can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not joking. I really do. But Gigi, I thought I'd talk enough to give you time to think about it as well. So definitely. Mate, please go for it.
Yeah. I mean, no, I'm glad we can end on a light-hearted note. But what I would definitely say to all of our listeners out there is, and I'm not excluding ladies as well. This is applicable to everyone. Is that just harking back and echoing back what Dan said a minute ago? I think it's very important that not only do we look at the systematic violence that we impose on ourselves and other people in society, but be kinder to ourselves. And I don't mean this in some sort of cliche buzzword. I mean,
no, we do. Screw it. We absolutely do. No, we do.
Be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
And that external stuff, bring inwards, as in get familiar, get okay with who you are, get okay with how you function as a human being, as a man, as a woman, whatever, right? Get super comfortable with it. And being comfortable does not mean getting lazy. Okay, getting comfortable is just being okay with, hey, I'm like this. I'm okay. I'm okay wearing moisturizer, right? I'm okay with doing my hair a certain way. I'm okay if people have told me my eyes are quite feminine, right? Who cares, right? And the more and more you get comfortable with that, the more accepting you are of yourselves, then the less violence you're committing on yourself, period. Okay. Remember, hurt people hurt other people, period. There is no, if there's such a truism, that is it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want you to take ownership of taking care of yourself, like Dan said, verbatim, but then also be aware that you can, on whatever road you're on, to whether that's masculinity, whether it's being a girl, you can walk off that. Okay. You learn the rules, you see what they are, and actually you get sick to the stomach with it and you start to create your own rules. That's what I think psychologically healthy people do. I've seen this.
Yeah, same. You get fed up with it.
Exactly. Ladies and gents, when that happens, we cannot tell you for sure. Okay, that can happen tomorrow, that can happen a year later, that can happen 10 years later. But yes, also be okay with fostering a healthy and independent autonomous identity away from all these smoke and mirrors and noises, conditioning, media, movies, fragrances telling you this is men only. All that stuff, get away from it.
That's so real, mate. When something says for men only, I'm like, get out of my way. Get out of here.
Get out of
what
here,
are you talking about? Nah, man.
Clever marketing.
It's not though. I can't. Nah, I don't fall for that.
Stupid,
I actually saw a box of tissues that was a box of tissues for men, and it was just bigger tissues. I was like, I didn't know men produced more stuff. Just get out of here. What are you doing? Trying to charge me more? Get out. No, I'm not buying tissues for men. Stop it.
Exactly.
Stop it.
I'll give our audience something light-hearted to finish off on, though, which is very similar to your tissues, right?
Yeah, go on.
It's like,
Sorry.
I kid you not. So I'm a huge fan of certain brands that I really like, and when I mean brands, these are very ethical brands, and their owners are very cool and stuff. Very transparent if you ask them a question. And they had a video on this a couple of days ago. But what I cannot stand personally, and I laugh at it a lot, is just like you said, Dan, when like a moisturizer or cream is targeted as men only, right? And most people can see that as absolute nonsense, right? Because if you flip the script over, look at the Inky list, the ingredients are exactly the same as the men's one as it is with the women's one. That's it. So this is just another funny way of how gender uses, very, I would say, binary, ways of looking at black and white ways of looking at men and
Yeah.
women, and then that's making your pocket a little bit lighter by the end of the day. It's just funny stuff, just something to laugh over. But that's pretty much it.
I do feel like non-binary people laugh at us sometimes. It's a joke, some of the things. But anyway, that is the end of this episode. If you want to hear more, actually, if anything has touched you today, if you've got anything to share, if you've got anything to off your chest, please do email us at the Gmail at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. That's where you should send it, right over there. But until then, thank you so much for listening, everyone. It's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from Gigi.
Have a wonderful week, y'all. We'll catch you later. You've been listening to the G&D Show. Thank you very much. If you've got any comments or questions, or if you're a student at City Bristol College and you want some one-to-one conversations with myself or Govinda, then please do email us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in another episode.